Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the COVID-19 pandemic has shown us just how devastating a global cross-border threat can be. Climate change and biodiversity loss are no different. In fact, they pose an even greater existential threat, to the extent that we have to put ourselves on what might be called a warlike footing. Having myself had the opportunity of consulting many of you over these past 18 months, I know you all carry a heavy burden on your shoulders, and you do not need me to tell you that the eyes and hopes of the world are upon you, to act with all dispatch and decisively, because time has quite literally run out.
Call halal Yahweh, Bashem Yahshai, Bashem Rakak Double honors unto the apostles and elders of Great Millstone. Peace and blessings to the hopeful elect. Shalom to the elect, and of course, Shalak Rayam to you demons. You know, it wasn't Klaus or Schwab or Bill Gates who created and launched the Great Reset. No, that was the prince who would become king, Charles III, ruler over the United Kingdom, along with, I believe the total is now 14 Commonwealth realms. Speaking of the Commonwealth, it was Lord Balfour, same Lord Slovakia Balfour, that in 1917 committed the British government to establishing a national home for the so-called Jewish people in Palestine, leading to the 1948 upheaval of 750, I believe it was 750,000 Palestinians occupying the land, our land. Only a few on both sides are true Israelites and hence indigenous to the land, by the way, in lieu of Israel being declared and recognized as an independent state. Now, the same Lord Balfour, along with the committee of, now let me get this right, inter-imperial relations in 1926 as, bear with me now, Lord President of the Imperial Conference of British Empire Leaders, say that 5 times fast, who this time announced that Britain and its dominions should be constitutionally equal to one another. I don't have to tell you of his relationship to the Rothschilds, who behind the scenes claim lineage to our natural enemy, Esau Edom. Publicly, they shun the idea, instead opting to be referred to as Jews and descendants of Jacob. Hence their backing in establishing Israel as a state. Again, they are not the people. Yet during World War II, used their money and resources to kill millions of the so-called Jews. Ish is a suffix which means like. I'll leave it up to you to figure that out. Now, like 1917, 1926, and essentially the 1948 undertaking, the consequence of these Build Back Better initiatives, because that's really what they are, great resets in the making, if you will, leading up to present day events, the consequence of these agendas are never readily apparent to those it ultimately deprives, it disenfranchises, or it displaces. If anything, all parties subject to 1926's constitutional agreement, for instance, were made subordinate, meaning lower in rank or position to the British Empire. For example, Canada, where I presently reside, which was one of the dominions afforded constitutional equality. Unbeknownst to them, Britain had retained certain powers over their so-called sovereignty. For example, Ottawa, the country's capital, which to me is debatable, but in any event, had limited control over its foreign policy and what extent they were able to interact with their supposed contemporaries. And it wasn't until 1982 Canada on a whole had full legal autonomy. Autonomy meaning the right to self-government. And here we have it again. World leaders in a said consolidated effort being led by Britain to permanently remove the legal rights of those who they consider less, as well as the middle class, which according to the agenda's sentiment they're just in the way. In all honesty, if history dictates, and it does, they have no problem in bleeding their own people into submission under the guise of establishing a quote-unquote better tomorrow. Unbelievable. No coincidence it was Meyer Amschel Rothschild who said, "You always want to buy when blood is running in the street." Ezekiel 35:6, the Heavenly Father says this, "Therefore, as I live, saith the power of Yahweh, I will prepare thee unto blood, and blood shall pursue thee. Sith thou hast not hated blood, even blood shall pursue thee." Ergo, Esau Edom, the number one head buster, is motivated by bloodletting, and ergo loves making his living from death and destruction, be it poverty, famine, induced poverty and famine, war, or the spreading of communicable diseases. Yahweh says, because you love shedding blood so much, now your blood must be shed. But we'll come back to that later. Verse 7. Thus will I make Mount Seir, the biblical home of Esau Edom, most desolate, and cut off from it him that passeth out and him that returneth, which speaks to him in his present day power seat of America. Now, I know I've said a mouthful, but if you don't go through the history to show Esau as the habitual over-the-line stepper he really is, then it's easy for the scoffers and scorners to come in and cry foul conspiracy theory, when you and I know, along with the elders who taught us, of course, this is all conspiracy fact. In any event, let's talk more scripture. Off the top, I got a couple more that easily sum up everything in a nutshell. Let's go to Revelation 17:10, because the covenant man himself, or so he would have you believe anyway, and I'm talking about the newly decorated leader of the Brits, really the agreed upon frontman of the elitists of Edom, who, if you didn't know, the Edomites are still in rulership today. Ecclesiastes 4:16 tells us there is no end to all the people. Nice try, vocab, but nah. Nevertheless, King Charles, the latest appointee, is about to show the true spirit of Esau as a nation. And not only have they been killing since they made shillings, they've been setting up this system of total control for a very, very long time. Revelation 17:10, and it reads, "And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and 1 is, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he must continue a short space." Again, more history, but this time I'll give you the more concise and to the point version. In short, the 5 Edomite empires that came and went are Rome, Germany, major and minor, France, Greece, and Spain. Out of the 5, the first that came into power is Spain. Going back to Cristobal Colon, you may know him as Christopher Columbus. The one that is the pagan Roman Empire that was still in power in the time of John the Revelator. The other that is not yet come is, speaking of Great Britain, the world's last ruling empire. Out of Britain came America and the 13 colonies. All are a succession of rulership under Esau, the nation of the Bible's Edomites. He must continue a short space. And in fact, Great Britain did, because not long after, the kingdom that would supersede it in reputation alone was born out of it. At this point, only a fool would argue against the fact that out of Britain, the elite have been running things behind these scenes till this day. But in the forefront is America, which for all intent and purposes only appears to be calling all the shots. Quick precept. I'm going to go to Psalm 36:3, and it says this: "The words of his mouth, of whose mouth Esau Edom, are iniquity," iniquity meaning sin upon sin upon sin, "and deceit. He hath left off to be wise and to do good." 2 things which speak to his nature. The first being manifest destiny, the 19th century doctrine and belief that the expansion of the U.S. throughout the American continents was both justified and inevitable. Hence the bloodletting of the indigenous people and the subjugation of so-called native people and land. And then there's the Monroe Doctrine, which warned European nations that the United States would not tolerate further colonization or puppet monarchs. But if you don't know, now you know. The U.S. is a corporation owned by Great Britain, i.e. the Virginia Company of London, which means they have no real power against European interests. Let's not forget London's unrivaled economic power via the House of D. Rothschild alone, which is why it all but makes sense in it being the center of economic power that entitles the beast system and its ambitions in instituting a new world order. This is not a isolated incident. It is a consolidated, again, a consolidated effort. And that consolidated effort is the Great Reset. That is the thing that has these global leaders' panties in a bunch. A one world dictatorship is the build back better these sociopaths keep going on about. The United States, Washington, D.C. to be exact, which incidentally is not a state, it's a district. The difference starts with the administrative authority. You can look it up yourself. Washington, D.C., where the Pentagon sits not too far from CIA headquarters, wink, wink, is the center head of the beast military, and the Vatican is its spiritual figurehead. Pretty much explains their latest alliance in global finance. The Rothschilds and the Vatican have a long-standing relationship themselves, going back to the 1800s, where the Vatican was indebted to the house via a series of loans made to them by the house. Not too long ago, we went into the three, which are the unclean spirits spoken of in the book of Revelation, the 16th chapter. Revelation 17 and 11, and it reads, "And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition." Perdition meaning utter destruction. The beast that was and is not is in reference to Rome reincarnated, which is America. Was and is not because America didn't exist until the 18th century. Great Britain was occupied by Rome for almost 400 years, and even for a short period, Rome was ruled from Britain until Septimius Severus, an Israelite, by the way, divided Britain into two provinces, Britannia Superior and Inferior, where the capitals, London and York, respectively, sit today. No coincidence, Septimius means seven and Severus means severe, sharing the root that means to sever. He severed the rule of the seven until an appointed time. America is the eighth king, i.e. kingdom, the king's domicile, as Elder Apostle Gabar puts it, of the seven, ergo under the same Edomite rulership that goeth into perdition, meaning being prepped for destruction. How's that for justified and inevitable? In any event, the Bible speaks of America as being the great whore, which is Babylon the Great. Fast forward to today, it's still the same whore, and all governments have drunken of the wrath of her fornication. Revelation 18 and 3. Ergo, they are all committed to the same wicked agenda and are all of one mind. That's Revelation 17. They all speak the same, whether they use the same catchphrases or throw up the same symbols publicly in their group photo ops. They all use the same talking points and issue the same narratives ready for sheeple consumption. Because for one, they're all the same people. And secondly, they are subject to and are being handled by the same think tanks that are set up for the system of global control. The same hidden powers that rule over us rule over them as well. Your boss ain't a boss, he got a boss, if you can dig it. The international bankers and elite globalists run all central banking and all governments via their administrations are subordinate to the central banking system. Although the BIS, the Bank for International Settlements, controls the central banks, they too are in the hands of the wicked, i.e. the men in the shadows, the aristocrats and the technocrats, basically the rich dummies that rule the world through violence and deceit, namely their fraudulent monetary system. What gets me is the well-to-dos and the have-nots alike in Babylon are all debt servants to what amounts to 30 trillion grams of glorified construction paper. The Kanyes and the Jay-Z's, the Dr. Dre's, even the likes of the Jeff Bezos are not on the Rothschild, Oppenheimer, or DuPont global dictatorship level. Entertainers don't rule, they entertain, and Bezos' arms ain't long enough to box with the elitists. The next scripture is from the book of Sirach, also known as Ecclesiasticus in the Apocrypha, which, despite popular belief, is a part of the Holy Bible. We know this because, for one, the prophecies outlined in the books continue to ring true. They line up perfectly with secular history. The succession of Caesars in 2nd Esdras, the 11th and 12th chapters, is one example. And don't get me started on current events. Anybody with an internet connection and working knowledge of history can see. They can see that plain as day. Number two, if it wasn't recognized as a colloquial book, America wouldn't use it in their presidential inaugurations or read it when their leaders are being laid to rest. Anywho, Ecclesiasticus 10 and we'll start at 8. I believe the point is in 8, and it says this. Because of unrighteous dealings, injuries, and riches got by deceit, the kingdom is translated from one people to another. Riches are never done away with. They are simply transferred from one rulership to another. For me who go through the plethora of unrighteous dealings and ill-gotten gains subject to the wicked hands of Esau, Edom, Job 9 and 24, in one sitting, would literally be impossible. Never mind the transatlantic slave trade and again the subjugating of so-called native peoples and their land, or the unrighteous decrees, that's Isaiah 10 and 1, and the draconian measures being taken against so-called peoples of color. What about the exploiting of people and the natural resources of the other nations? How about British colonization? How about bombing Hiroshima? How about fiat currency in Slovakia, taxation? How about inflation? How about America lining up tanker truck after tanker truck last month in Syria and stealing more than 80% of their oil? How's about that? How's this for the ultimate okie doke? Years ago, Elder Apostle Tahar, along with the other apostles and elders on down, of course, impressed upon us the seriousness of Brexit, Britain's exit from the European Union. The book of Daniel, second chapter, Revelation 17, Ezekiel 38 and 13, Jeremiah 50 even, all speak to Brexit and the aftermath. For those not in the know, Brexit was a major event in prophecy because it heralded in the dismantling of the Renaissance, the so-called white establishment's resurgence to power. The EU cannot stand because of the inconsistency in economic viability. Some parts are viable and others are just weak, plain weak, last week, which creates a rift and division in the overall system. Remember, I told you the integral role Britain plays in finances. What Brexit did was create the domino effect, which led to speeding up the crash of global markets and their monetary systems, respectively. And you are bearing witness to that now, even though the Russian ruble is the strongest currency on the foreign exchange. The ruble, the yen, the euro, the pound sterling, etc., 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 are all collapsing. This was a desired effect by who? Those that initiated the downward spiral of economies in the first place. The men working behind the scenes where Britain is the head. Why? Because ultimately what comes after a market crash and crash of the petrodollar is the initiatives we have before us now. Build Back Better, a global reset. You'll own nothing and you'll be so happy you'll thank them for it, or whatever the slogan is, which leads to what? The implementation of a digitized cash system and the warlike footing that will enforce the MOTB, the RFID micro CHI to the P. Ergo, total control of the people for the world's so-called elite. Let's close with this. Let's go to James, the 5th chapter. We'll start at verse 1. Go to now, ye rich men, weep and howl for your miseries that shall come upon you. Speaking to the filthy rich of Esau, the Rothschilds, the aforementioned Rockefellers, the Oppenheimers, the DuPonts, the J.P. Morgans of the world. Just as Jacob was scattered across the globe and looks like every nation, it is the same for Esau, Edom. Let's not forget the Lee bloodline of the top tier Illuminati families. Lee coming, yeah, Illuminati is real. Lee, I can hear it now, conspiracy theory. Lee coming out of China, of course. All will be brought down ultimately when Yahweh Bashem Yahushua returns to recompense the so-called elite globalists who find comfort in the rulership established by Esau Edom. Whether by lineage or confederacy, they all will be recompensed for the wicked practices they spread on earth and the injustices laid on the apple of Yahweh's eye, we Hebrew Israelites. All starting with the elect, of course. I mean, he has no choice but to weep and howl, just as we did when we were faced with the same miseries Much adversity and many aches and pains, many restless and sleepless nights. And that's a clean version, are waiting for Esau Edom when the Lord does to him what he's done to us, place him in captivity and subject him to hard labor. Verse 2, Salakia. Your riches are corrupted and your garments are moth-eaten. Your gold and silver is cankered, and the rust of them shall be a witness against you, and shall eat your flesh as it were fire. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. Now, we know gold and silver can't rust, so this must speak to this system of oppression they set up that is actually tarnished. That old system is on its way out the door as Russia, China, basically the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, who too has a tremendous bone to pick with Esau over colonialism and the theft of resources. Matter of fact, the Star of Africa set in the Queen's scepter, and the Koh-i-Noor, one of the world's largest cut diamonds, presently set in the Queen's crown, which was annexed from India, I believe Punjab, in the 1800s. Also a part of the crown jewels, is an example of the other aspect that speaks to rust, that shall be a witness against the nation of Edom, because it speaks to their theft, their robbery, murder, and deceit Esau has used to obtain its riches. Rust speaks to Esau's unjust weights and measures, its unjust checks and balances, like a currency backed by digits on a computer screen that can be fudged and altered at any time. Ultimately, Rust, unbelievable, speaks to Esau's wickedness. The precept there is Sirach 12 and 10. As I was saying, that old system is out the door because the new reserve currency will have none to do with the U.S. The new trade currency is going back to real money, natural earth tangibles, i.e. mineral resources, oil, gold, silver, uranium, copper, and nickel. Russia and China have taken the lead in establishing the Asian-wide replacement for the U.S. petrodollar. Look it up. Look it up yourselves. Eat your flesh as it were fire. Why? Because Esau's whole agenda will go up in smoke. Job 5 and 12 tells us that Yahweh Bashem Yahushai is going to throw a monkey wrench in their whole program, and their plans for a new world enterprise, i.e. a new world order, is going to backfire. This is why you see CEOs from major corporations committing suicide, jumping from the very same buildings their ill-gotten gains created to their death. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days. And this is why you see CEOs from major corporations resigning. Why King Charles, who is really the king puppet, he is a paper tiger. You can tell by that finger Evelyn D. Rothschild pointed in his chest, in his bird chest. Charles has no qualms about leading the charge publicly in resetting the current way of doing business under the guise of climate change and thwarting off another pandemic. All malarkey, by the way, starting by destroying the world's present currency system, cash money, the almighty dollar. Why? Because they have already planned and prepared for the times ahead. Ye have heaped treasure together for the last days also speaks to the stockpiling of gold and silver the other nations have been doing, while America has dug itself further and further into debt. Even though Russia is a nation subject to Esau in its rule and not a part of the beast system, it too will meet its end. We'll close at 4, and it says this. Behold, the hire of the laborers who have reaped down your fields, speaking to we so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Indians who were delivered into slavery at the hands of Esau Edom from the transatlantic slave trade or the atrocities committed against Gad and the rest of the northern kingdom that were recorded in the destruction of the Indies, written in 1542, to being so-called emancipated, which really we were passed from one hand of oppression to the next, and our present-day condition as modern-day slaves, which is of you kept back by fraud. Kept back by fraud because we weren't paid for our forced labor. Our blood, sweat, and tears built Esau's economic superpowerism. Yet we are the only nation privy to Britain's and America's cruelty upfront that were never compensated as such. Crieth, and the cries of them which have reaped are entered into the ears of the Lord of Sabaoth. The Lord of Sabaoth, meaning the Lord of armies, the chief head buster. The Heavenly Father has heard the sighing and the crying of the saints. He has seen the evil and the unjust treatment of his people and our desires regarding salvation for those who remain faithful, that is, will not go unanswered when he returns. To Isaiah 47:3, meet thee as a man. Last precept, Isaiah 34:6, and then we can close. The sword of Yahweh is filled with what? Blood. It is made fat with fatness and with the blood of lambs and goats, with the fat of the kidneys of rams, for Yahweh hath a sacrifice in where? Basra. Just another region of the biblical home of Esau. Present day again, speaking to America. And a great slaughter in the land of Idumea, speaking to the nation, the Greek way for saying Edom. Stay strong, family. We are almost out of here. The writing has long been on the wall, Israel. We are just going through the motions as the Lord lets the end of this thing play out. No Klaus Schwab, Cotton Schwab, no prince with a new title. None can do or say anything to stop what Yahweh has ordained to come to pass. And with that, I'll end by saying, Kal Halal Yahweh, Ba'Shem Yahushai, Ba'Shem Dash, through the power and spirit. I hope you are edified. Double honors unto the elders and apostles of Great Millstone who teach this 100% truth, 100% truth, 100% truth, and rule well. 144% truth and rule well. Salutations to the hopeful elect. Peace and blessings to the elect. Shalom Yasharala. Kwam Yasharala. Wa Abad Babal.